Hello and welcome to Martalks, where we talk about leadership and innovation in the internet economy, software, and digital agencies. I'm your host, Daryl Rosenstein. Today we're joined by Chris Lemmer, the CEO of Swift, a digital agency focusing on the creative side of things in South Africa. They have some of the top accounts in that country, including Mattress Outfitter, Kui, Canada Abroad, Master Drilling, Good Luck, and Matthew Mole. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Daryl, and for having me.
Well, we can launch right into things here because I'm sure everybody's very curious about the marketplace down there in South Africa. And I know that you work globally and have accounts around Europe and some here in the United States as well. But in your backyard, so to speak, one of the most popular solutions is an integration between WooCommerce, which is a WordPress based e commerce backend, and Vue Storefront. And that might surprise some of our listeners in the API first space who regard WordPress as ancient history. And yet, this is proving to be a great success for you. So tell us, why WooCommerce?
I think the very interesting thing is that a lot of store owners, not only in South Africa but globally, when they start doing e-commerce for the first time, they start exploring this space and sphere. They look for various different options, and as we know, Shopify, WooCommerce, these are the platforms that they come across. And the big challenge is a lot of startups start with a WooCommerce site, and then as they survive, the first few years and they start growing, they really have a store that has great flexibility with plugins and stuff, but it starts reaching certain limitations with scalability, performance, and all these various different things that we know of. And there really isn't a great solution available at the moment for building headless or decoupled commerce with WooCommerce. So this Vue storefront integration that we're working on is a solution allowing store owners and WooCommerce developers and also smaller businesses to actually access this technology and keep on using the stack that they currently use, and they don't have to migrate to a new stack to now accommodate this new technology era that we're really going into of composable commerce.
Well, you have a global footprint, as I said, but you're based in South Africa. What insights can you share about the South African and African market for that matter, chiefly with regard to the technology buyers in the market and the solutions that they're interested in that would be useful to other vendors that wanted to sell in the territory?
So what we see is that even very big brands like Weber, for instance, which is a international brand and started in the United States, even companies like them locally running e-commerce stores are using WooCommerce. So we've actually compiled a list of 100 companies in the country, some of which are very big and international, that are all using this tech stack. And this is something we see a lot is the majority of the agencies in South Africa that are starting and building e-commerce sites for businesses are using WooCommerce. And that's just a very interesting trend in the market. And I believe from research, if you look at inlift.com and you look at WooCommerce, their stats, the States still has the biggest amount or largest amount quantity of WooCommerce sites in the world. So it's a lot over there as well. But we really do see that if you hear about somebody building an e-commerce site in South Africa or an agency, you can just guess that it's WooCommerce, and mostly it is. So very small to very large businesses are using it.
Now, I know that some of the companies that you're working with might be interested in going headless for their entire stack. What sort of challenges do they have, and how do they typically start out?
So typically, if you start out as a very small business and you grow and you survive the first few years, you get more staff members, you get more integrations, you really start investing in your WooCommerce tech stack, and you then reach a point, let's just say 5 years into your business, where you've probably gone through the third iteration of a WooCommerce store and you've invested a lot, and you're starting to see a store with 50 or 60 plugins that you've bought over the years. You've bought various themes, your database is cluttered with additional data and tables and stuff, and now you're stuck at a point where it's slow because it's a monolith. You can't really scale. So the first challenge is you've reached the limit of what you can do further with your WooCommerce store. The other challenge is also cost. So if you now have to migrate to a Magento or to a completely new platform, your entire investment over the years is essentially lost, and you have to retrain your staff, you have to rebuild all your integrations. So these store owners tend to not want to lose that, investment and retain the WooCommerce store that they have. So, and then integration. So you've built a lot of integrations over the years. If you're building an integration with an accounting system or something like that, that's very expensive development that you'll lose if you migrate away. So those are some of the challenges that they have.
Well, and I gather that you took a novel approach to your market research when it came to designing your WooCommerce and View storefront integration. Tell us the story, but also tell us why it matters with regard to the kinds of specialist insights that you can access as a technology vendor and innovator by tapping into a carefully selected audience of potential users of that technology.
So we take a product first approach. So, product managers specifically are they're actually quite a new role. And what they do for most agencies is we don't just go and build a product like in the olden days and align our whole team and our whole warehouse. We get all the investment in the whole product line and then nobody wants to buy the product. That's what it still happens today, but it's we go by the lean approach. So the lean startup, if you think about Eric Rice, what he describes there, it's really to build the MVP, like what's the smallest experiment you can do to test this and see whether people will actually use this product. And that's the approach we want to take. So that's why we want to do market research and build something people actually want to use. So the approach we took as a small startup agency with not hundreds of thousands of dollars is we created a landing page for our View storefront WooCommerce integration. That's in progress at the moment, and we ran some Reddit ads. We spent $250 to be exact, and we got about 20 or 30 email addresses of people subscribing for our beta program. So for clarity, that's not the people that went to the landing page. We had more, but 20 or 30 out of them actually subscribed, and we've interviewed probably about 10, asking about the challenges and validating this problem. And it's clear across the board, across the globe. We've interviewed people from the States, from the UK, from Mauritius, from South Africa, and the problem people are facing is the same. It's so we know there's a problem there. We know we're solving something, and our target audience is at least for starting out really those developers that are doing work for agencies and giving them a tool that they can use to solve the problem for the agencies. So that's the approach. And we've also spoken to Inlift and looked at their data. Their data on WooCommerce is pretty accurate. And there you can also see roughly 40,000 stores globally in the region of 10 to $50 million a year turnover are using WooCommerce. So there are also big businesses and a lot of them.
Kudos to you for using that methodology, putting the ad in Reddit. I mean, what a return on investment that was. But, there's always a gap between the technology that the industry says people ought to be using and what they're actually using in reality. And listening to the people that do the work, the developers and the buyers alike, is probably the most valuable insight in calling the market and innovating around it that you did. And again, I commend your innovation in figuring that out. But as it stands, you're a relatively small business in the digital agency world, but you serve businesses of many different sizes, from small to mid markets up to enterprise. And what can you tell us about the unique perspective that gives you at Swift? Is it fair to say that large companies may sometimes be guilty of missing the wood for the trees and potentially have a lot to gain from collaborating with partners that, like Swift, operate at different scales?
I think, when you're starting out as a smaller business, you what you can afford at that stage, unless you have a lot of funding, is smaller companies with less expertise and cheaper resources. And I'm, not saying that's always the rule of thumb, but generally that's what happens. So the kind of mistakes that you're going to make as a business will be the same as a lot of businesses have made before you. And the advantage that it gives us to work with enterprise companies as well is that we understand the challenges of when you're starting out, you have one branch, one person, you're getting orders from your e-commerce store. Now you employ a second person, a third, you need a warehouse, you get another warehouse in another location. Immediately that starts adding challenges, logistics, where do you ship stock from? And there are so many things if you want to integrate your campaigns or you want to do data warehousing, where if you're a small store, you wouldn't even think about those things. And we have worked with small and enterprise stores, so we understand where they end up and design and build a solution that can really work for the enterprise businesses as well and allow them to scale with this technology stack.
Well, you're a developer who's made the transition yourself to being a business leader, which reflects the profile of a lot of founders of solutions vendors today. And what did you gain from that perspective?
So the it's an interesting thing, as you say. A lot of developers going to the business area of the industry. I think understanding the challenge that a developer has and building a solution that doesn't just work but is also affordable for the company, that's future proof, and understanding the impact that software has on the business and architecture of that is very important. So it's pretty easy to stand, if you're purely from a business perspective, to make certain decisions in a certain way. But if you understand the software and you understand the architecture and you've been on the ground, you've been a soldier, you've been in the trenches, you've got a different perspective to, the guy controlling the army, if I can use that analogy. And that really helps to understand how developers see things, and also creating environments and code bases that they like to work with and communities that they like to work with, having understood that area as well.
Now, have you had the experience of any of the vendors that you work with leaning into you to better speak to the buyer's priorities and goals?
We interview them and we ask them the same questions. And I believe, a lot of people always say ROI is the big thing, or they want a higher conversion rate. But it's really e-commerce. It's really more than just that. It's that this constant balance between performance and user experience. And often businesses prioritize, one over the other without realizing that all these things influence each other. So we do have an understanding of that. And the I think the big thing is, if you go with the composable commerce route, you're not compromising your performance and your user experience. You're Because it's always this constant balance between, if your site is faster, your user experience lacks, and vice versa. So those really are goals that businesses have. And also third-party integrations, so microservices. There's always these things that they want to build around the solution that needs to work, and priorities and goals that they have. So I believe this approach really fits that very well.
Now, I'd also imagine that, at this point, you can see through the marketing, having actually used these systems and knowing their true potential and limitations.
Our initial persona is going to be the developers. So going into the developer communities, as we've done with the Reddit ads and with organic posts, done with polls and stuff, because they're really the people having the problem. They're running WooCommerce, they're feeling the pain, and this is solving that pain for them. And then I a secondary approach to that would be a more thought leadership. So, get into the mind of the business owner who knows they're using WooCommerce and WordPress, and who have heard the developers saying constantly, we have these problems, and then saying, hey guys, isn't this potentially a solution? So that would be a more long-term goal of the buyer's process of this as well. But initially, we're looking to build a community around it within the View Storefront sphere, which is open source at this stage, and really taking an approach of getting a developer adoption as the priority.
Now, have you, in driving that presence of Vue, have you been able to help Vue understand the buyers better in your marketplace and discover a different way of working and how they have interacted with your clients?
I think they have a lot of integrations, and I think they learn from every of the integrations. We've definitely shared some of the findings and ideas. For instance, the Reddit, they also think that was very creative. But we have shared some of our findings that we had in the industry with them, which they also found interesting and news to them. Um, so definitely our aspects. I believe every integration that they build, whether it's themselves or the community, they will learn new stuff and more stuff. And that's because every one of these frameworks service a different persona. So WooCommerce versus Shopify, although they're very similar, the people have slightly different needs. Magento still different needs. So I believe every time View Storefront builds an integration, they will learn something new. And I think one of the big challenges and things that we've learned around WooCommerce is because it's the world's biggest e-commerce platform in terms of adoption, there are so many plugins and things around it that going headless and having this framework, but then losing some of that is going to be a difficulty. You must have to build a really big community around it so that they also build integrations for View Storefront.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and answering these questions and giving us your perspective. I'm sure we'll see some great sites coming out of Swift, and I look forward to shopping them.
Great. Thanks a lot for having me, Daryl. It was great fun chatting with you. And yeah, looking forward to chatting again, hopefully sometime soon.